This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My brother and I were home alone, since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party. They had tasked us with handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. This bummed me and my brother out, because we had made plans to go out trick-or-treating with a few friends. Our parents told us that we were too old to be trick-or-treating, and that instead we could invite our friends over to the house and hang out there. My friends declined my invitation to come over because they still wanted to go trick-or-treating. So that left me and my brother home alone handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our house, and by 10 o'clock, almost all the candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we'd eat the rest. We're sitting on the couch watching a scary movie, stuffing ourselves with candy, when there was a knock at the door. I stormed off the couch wondering who the hell could be knocking at our door this late. I assumed it was just some late night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light and the Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we were out of candy or we weren't home, so I assumed it was my parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw a suspicious man standing on our front porch, who was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face. The only detail of his face that I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There was no way that this guy was a trick-or-treater, because he wasn't wearing a costume, and he was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket of his hoodie. He also looked very thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There was no way in hell I was gonna open the door. Still looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked again on the door. He seemed desperate for us to open the door, and he was shaking a bit. It wasn't cold outside. Definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. "We're out of candy," I shouted at him. I watched as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile either. "Are you alone in there?" the man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry. "Should I call the police?" my little brother asked me quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a grumble and said, "Sounds like you're alone in there." I continued to watch him through my peephole. His hands were wedged tightly in his pocket, and he was still shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most imitating voice I could. "Get the fuck away from my house or I'll call the police," I shouted. His smile faded, and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow, and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had a look of fury plastered on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in, probably because he knew I wasn't fucking around with him. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole until I saw him completely off our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the police. My brother and I were a bit paranoid after this, and watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about this man, since he hadn't really tried to harm us. Now when I think about this, I wish we had called the police, and maybe we would have been able to prevent a murder. You see, the next day we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbor found her lying on her porch, covered in blood. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and in the neck. My brother and I immediately knew who had done it, and we told the police what we knew. They couldn't do much from the information we had given them, since we didn't see what the man looked like. They went on to hunt for the man, but they never caught him. I'd blame myself for that poor old lady's murder, because I could have prevented it from happening just by calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of all of this is that he didn't take anything from the old lady's house. Her house had been left untouched. He could have gone in and taken anything he wanted, since her door was wide open. This means that he just wanted to kill. That was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewelry. He only had the urge to murder. So creepy crackhead, Halloween slasher, let's not meet.
When I was in high school, me and my friends would spend Halloween night at our friend Emily's house. Her parents were cool with us hanging out and being teenagers all night. So often we would trick-or-treat and spend the night, get drunk, etc. Emily lives about 1,000 feet from our high school, and the neighborhood was arranged in a square pattern. A park, 4 streets bordering it, 4 more streets surrounding that, The layout means there's a lot of side streets, alleyways, and there's a dozen ways to get in anyone's house. Our sophomore year, we did our usual thing. This year I went as a pimp because all my friends wanted to wear sexy outfits. It was a stupid theme, but immature us, we thought it was hilarious. We started drinking a bottle of shitty vodka and went trick-or-treating. For about an hour, it was fun. Saw a bunch of friends from school, got candy, talked about sneaking some guys' friends over later on. It was shaping up to be a good night. But as we reached one corner of the neighborhood and turned down the next, this creepy man comes up to us. He was what you imagine someone's dad would look like. Old, balding, and most importantly, not attending to a child. He approaches us and I say something in character like, "Which girl are you interested in?" We giggle and laugh and continue to pass him, but he reaches out to grab one of our friends. A firm grip on her arm. He says something along the lines of, "She's really cute, how much?" At first I was just fooling around, but him grabbing her made all of us very uncomfortable. So we say, "Dude, we're messing around, we're 15. He lets go and we bounce. My friend freaks out. We decide not to play around anymore and just get some candy. We head down another street and keep a lookout for this guy. My friend's still grossed out, but we managed to keep our fun going. But this guy shows up again, scanning the crowd for us. Quickly, we lock eyes and he backs off into the flow of crowd. I tell my friends the creeper's still following us, and we skip a few houses to put some distance between us and the guy. We keep going and we see him again, only this time he's in front of us. Like I mentioned, the number of side streets and alleys means you can take a detour of the main streets and still up in the same destination. And with 30 or 40 people passing through at a time, nobody really notices this man. We see him and we stop dead. This guy is clearly following us, and we made it pretty clear we were kids messing around. We decided to stomach it and keep going past him, pretending we don't notice the creepy man. As we go by, he says nothing, just watching us obviously as he possibly can before we turn down the street. And once he can't see us anymore, we get out of there and run back to Emily's house, hoping that we're moving too fast for him to follow. We get back to her house and we decompress and flip out for a few minutes. But we forget about it once we get a bonfire going. The guys sneak over and we pass the drinks around. A few hours later, the streets are empty and the only people still up are us, trying our best to keep as silent as we can. We hear a car moving very slowly down the street. Not like someone heading home after a night out, but like they're trying to look out the window and moving too fast will make them miss it. We look out over the gate and see the car creeping along. But it's too dark inside to really make out who was driving. But we watched it hit the end of the street and keep going. It passed by another time that night and it got us all wound up, so we called it a night. It was a family neighborhood, so no one would really be driving out past 2 a.m. In our heads, the only person who would be doing something like that was the man we saw earlier looking for us. So creepy guy who grabbed my underage friend with a bunch of people around and followed us for the most of the night, let's not meet.
Halloween has unfortunately never been a big deal out here in Scotland. That's always bummed me out because I love Halloween, but after this year, I think I'll be happy never celebrating it again. My street and the next street have a lot of young kids who go out trick-or-treating, so while I was shopping all day with my mom, we decided to pick up a few sweets just in case anyone came to our door. I had plans to go out to the cinema to see Ouija with my boyfriend. So when I got home, I was getting myself ready to go out, and my mom was busy putting the groceries away. So when the first load of kids came to the door, I was the one who had to answer it. There were some kids from our street. Some of the kids I couldn't recognize, as well as an adult at the end of the path. I guessed it was either a father or an older brother by their size, and they were dressed in all black and had some sort of mask covering their face. It wasn't anything I recognized from a movie or anything. Anyway, they told me all their jokes and I gave them their treats, and they made their way back down the path onto the next house. I was about to close the door when I noticed the guy with the kids was standing still at the end of my path. I hadn't noticed, and he wasn't watching the children either. He was looking right at me, and my skin started to crawl when I realized that he was staring just at me. I backed slowly into the house and watched him as he raised his hand and moved very slowly at me. I was about to call him out when my mom came to the door to make sure I was alright, and he took off in the opposite direction from the children. He hadn't been with them at all, and he left as soon as he realized I wasn't home alone. I was completely freaked out, and I told my boyfriend all about it when he came to my house to pick me up, but I quickly forgot all about it when we were watching the movie. When I finally got home, it was getting really late and trick-or-treating was well and over around here. When I got inside, my mom was just getting ready to take out the dogs so that they could do their last-minute business and they would meet my dad on his way home from work. So I was going to be home alone. I really don't like being home alone, but it's worse on Halloween. Anyway, I was home alone and I grabbed some snacks and went up to my bedroom and onto my computer so that I could do some of my writing and scroll through Tumblr and listen to music. After my first creepy encounter with some guys coming into my house and into my backyard, my dad bought a motion-censored light and attached it to the wall of our house right outside my window. Normally it will go off whenever a cat walks along our fence, but it will usually go off after a couple of minutes. I always know when the light has come on because it lights up my whole room, given where it's placed. And while I was sitting on my computer, the light came on. I ignored it at first because I knew that it would go off soon, but 5 minutes passed and it had still not gone off. So I opened my blinds and looked outside to see what was going on. My stomach fell when I looked outside and saw the creep from hours before, sitting on the fence, waving at my window to keep the light on. His hand slowly waving, and suddenly, when he spotted me, and it was all seriously creepy again, I didn't know what to do. I just got flashbacks from before. Luckily, I heard the front door open and my parents were coming into the house with the dogs, so I rushed downstairs and started screaming at them about the guy. My dad didn't question me, he just took the dogs and rushed out the house and threw the back door open and ran outside. I heard him shouting, "Get the fuck out of here, you creep, or I'm gonna call the police." My dad scared him off, but I convinced him not to call the police because I didn't want to relive the whole thing again. I just wanted to go to sleep and forget about the whole night. So creepy guy in the mask waving at me from the end of my path and sitting on my fence. Let's not meet.